On this spot, on October 2nd, 1986, municipal authorities forcibly ended the activities of a local religious group, the Church of the Holy Gospel of the Divine Messenger whose face is unto a cloud of swirling cubes. Government records deny the existence of the fringe religious order, yet current residential rumors of strange mathematical formulas etched into sidewalks and bizarre geometric constructions suggest the church's influence still lingers in the neighborhood. Vancouver's downtown east side has had its share of churches, cults, and fringe religious groups. Some existed to help others, while others looked only to help themselves. But there's one whose lasting impact can still be felt to this day. They called themselves the Church of the Holy Gospel of the Divine Messenger whose face is unto a cloud of swirling cubes. A mysterious organization. What is known is that on October 2nd, 1986, the Vancouver Police Department's Paranormal Threat Assessment Squad, Unit 313, put an end to the group's activities. Have you heard anything about strange cults operating in East Vancouver?
Nothing specific. There's been a lot of interesting things on the walls and around, but nothing that points to anything, like a group.
I've heard that back in the day there was like a weird organization that was specifically into like the worship of geometric figures, cubes, and constructs. Have you ever heard anything about those kind of things happening in East Van?
There were some things in Chinatown that were kind of throwing people off. Strange shapes in the stores.
This would have been in the mid-80s?
Oh, I'm going back to like the 1920s and 30s. I mean, if anything, a lot of them were linked to supposed tunnels. Yeah.
Tunnels underground downtown or underground East Vancouver.
There are buildings. I mean, there's the one building in Hastings which was supposed to have a tunnel from it to where the person lived, and there was I can't remember all the details right now. I think it was a home for, I want to say it was a home for girls, but that's wrong. But there was a link between these two buildings.
And do you think those tunnels still have any connection to any of these like possible cult behavior that was going on during this time?
It's very possible. I mean, it would take a lot of, the secrecy to
build something like that and keep it a secret. I mean, a lot of this only came out in this century.
Have you ever felt lost, confused, alienated from those around you? Have you ever suspected the universe might be a better place if we were all just one singular person, thinking one singular thought for all eternity? Can you imagine a messenger from God who has a secret just for you? And can you imagine that messenger having a cranial region, which is a visible mass of condensed three-dimensional shapes, each with 6 equal square faces, 12 equal edges, and 8 vertices?
The Church of the Holy Gospel of the Divine Messenger, whose face is unto a cloud of swirling cubes.
You have a special place here with us.
File 059A. Subject: Municipal enforcement action against local religious organization. Date: November 8, 1986. Introduction.
In the decades since its official inception, Vancouver and the extended Lower Mainland have been home to a plethora of theologies, many of which were begat in that self-same region. From the popular Brotherhood of the Squabbling Socks, 1809 to 1932, to the more obscure Consommateurs du Souffle Ardent de Dieu, or Eaters of God's Flames, 1967 to 1976. Something about this area seems to inspire mortal minds to opine upon the will of the ethereal. and to gather others about them in a celebration of whatever feverish discoveries they decide to base their lives around. When it came to purposeful intents, the vast majority of these religions fell into one of two categories. The first was those seeking personal enlightenment, or some other form of soothing salve for the soul. The second was, of course, those who sought pleasures of a more carnal or financial nature. But then there was the Church of the Holy Gospel of the Divine Messenger, whose face is unto a cloud of swirling cubes, and they were something else entirely.
Origins.
The Church of the Holy Gospel of the Divine Messenger, whose face is unto a cloud of swirling cubes, traces its origins back to 1979 when... Look, that title is way too long. I'm just going to call them the Cubers from now on, okay? The Cubers traces their origins back to 1979, when a man named Olivius Toboggan had what he described as a spiritual encounter with an odd system of geometric abstractions in East Vancouver, down by the train tracks. Born in 1947 to a pair of blind sharecroppers in East Buttsville, Saskatchewan, Olivius Toboggan came to Vancouver in the summer of 1967. A penniless vagabond and failed gigolo who eked out a paltry existence by wooing unchoosy widows. In his own words, he found himself ethically adrift, spiritually scattered, and according to civic records, possessed of a rare venereal disease that resulted in his genitals making an unpleasantly disquieting whistling sound when aroused. In an attempt to cure himself of these afflictions, he began experimenting with psychedelics, including LSD, mescaline, salvia, and a rare DMT derivative extracted from a unique form of blue mold. It was while on a combination of these supposedly medicinal psychotropics that Olivius had his encounter with the entity which would change his life and the city of Vancouver forever. While he would only speak of his encounter in a series of baffling and increasingly inappropriate metaphors, what's known to be fact is this. Something, or somebody, seemed to fold into existence, bending out of empty space, and once it was fully present, it had a lot to say.
Three. Belief system.
While fanatically devoted to their cause, the Cubers don't really like to talk about that stuff with outsiders. Like if you think Scientologists are cagey about Xenu, this is next level. They claim to be all into good vibes and groovy feelings and just being, you know, like kind to everybody. But somewhere under that is something else. An empty, hungering void. An entity with empty eye sockets that can tear out your soul just by looking at you. Bad hoodoo, you know what I'm saying? I've got my suspicions.
Four. Membership.
While the Cubers claimed to be open to all, the church had a tendency to attract society's stragglers, those living on the edges of the community, many of whom had been psychologically troubled by personal experiences with localized surrealisms. These were people traumatized into docile states, left vulnerable to being taken advantage of by those who had a loose understanding of their condition and the potential causes. The actual number of members, from the true believers to hangers-on, is still debated to this day. More than a dozen? Less than 100? Nobody's really sure. They all shaved their heads, including the eyebrows, and they wore long red robes patterned with trippy geometric shapes and arcane mathematical formulas. And they were scared of the sun. Well, maybe not so much scared, as they thought it should mind its own business and stay out of theirs.
Five, conflict with authorities.
For their first couple of years, the Cubers succeeded in avoiding the attention of local authorities. However, this situation was drastically altered on the night of October 12, 1980, when police were alerted to a break-in at a former SIAMR laboratory and discovered a cluster of Cubers who'd been sent on a religious pilgrimage by one of the church elders to acquire some enchanted relics or jinxed artifacts from the abandoned science site. The following statement was given by one of the officers who was at the scene, whose name was redacted from all official records.
Incident report. Date: October 12, 1980. Time: 2:13 a.m. Officer.
Redacted.
Statement.
We arrived just after midnight. The place smelled like a slaughterhouse. The air was thick with a stink of blood, piss, shit. Innards spilled outwards. One of the kids, a girl, was still alive. She gave us the full story as she bled out across the floor. She said they'd been sent on a holy mission. They called themselves the Church of the Holy Gospel of the Divine Messenger, whose face is unto a cloud of swirling cubes. And they'd been looking for some sort of living machine. One of the clerics of their supposed religious order had dreamed about it in a... The girl said they'd been expecting to find a mechanical animal or a... Instead, what they discovered was a section of the lab which had been partially converted into a level 6 brutal, ghastly stuff. The whole space was breathing softly, in and out, sending a rush of sickeningly warm air rushing past us as we worked. You could see veins pumping some kind of black blood just under the surface of the walls, the floor, the ceiling. In other sections, clumps of organic tissue were self-generating, growing like mold, like pustules sickening out of healthy skin. In one corner was a clump of what looked like, God help me, they looked like teeth, gnashing, gnawing, some as big as my fist. Why would a building grow teeth? What it could need them for? We got the remains of the kids out, and the girl who was still alive. Then we called in and handed it all off to them, and that was it. We were left with a bunch of bad memories that felt like misremembered nightmares, and no real answers. Not that any of us wanted answers. Just seeing what we'd seen was enough. Nobody wanted to know any more than they had to. But a week later, word came down from the top. The Church of the Holy Gospel of the Divine Messenger, whose face is unto a cloud of swirling cubes, was real, and we were to prevent them from gaining any more ground or credibility. Of course, most of that responsibility would fall to those creeps, but the point had still been made. Vancouver would not sit idly by and allow itself to be overrun by yet another gang of mentally aberrant cultists.
Six, final confrontation.
On July 2nd, 1986, municipal authorities conducted a direct conflict with the Cubers, resulting in the mandated cessation of all church activities. In classic stormtrooper style, a bunch of black-masked goons busted down the door of the central church, with the majority of the Cubers hauled away in chains, held without trial, and in many cases simply disappeared, in the way many annoying figures have disappeared from our city after frustrating local authorities, or after meddling with powers human minds cannot hope to comprehend. Total media blackout. There may have been a clip about the story on CBC News that weekend, but further investigations have concluded that any recordings of the supposed transmission were likely suppressed through the usage of military-grade electromagnetic signaling.
Seven. Outcome and closing thoughts.
By 1987, the Church of the Holy Gospel of the Divine Messenger, whose face is unto a cloud of swirling cubes, had been erased from the face of the city like a popped pimple, leaving behind a sore red crater on the face of the local psychosphere that persists to this day. However, in recent years there has been evidence to suggest that the cubers were never fully eradicated, and were instead simply driven into a passive, regressive state, to await a time when their enemies had grown old and sickly, at which point they might once again walk the streets of the downtown East Side in their weird red robes, standing on street corners to scream the gospel of their divine Messiah, and his mission to absorb this universe and all the sentient beings who live within it into his psyche, until all existence is reduced to a horrible dream in the mind of a sleeping monster. I have seen the evidence myself. Occultist equations etched by human fingernails into sidewalk concrete. A series of ornately stacked rhombouses placed in threatening positions outside specific civic centers. A man's hand found fractaled in a dumpster, its infinite multitude of fingers still clutching a bit of the fabric previously worn by the robed disciples. I believe the Church of the Holy Gospel of the Divine Messenger, whose face is unto a cloud of swirling cubes, is still out there, waiting for the time at which they will once again lay claim to the eerie powers which inhabit this city, and hasten our metaphysical erasure.